Presentation of dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho.
Would you spend a year in the wilderness for your honeymoon? Coming up next, I'll talk to two Idahoans who did and parlayed the adventure into a national PBS documentary. Life on the River of No Return, next on Dialogue. Stay tuned.
Can you imagine what some beach in Hawaii would be like right now?
Hot, terrible, out of sand all over me. Ooh, that sounds good.
Water.
This may not be everyone's idea of a honeymoon,
Almost went down.
but it was ours. We wanted to fulfill a dream, to live for a year in the wildest place left in the lower 48, the River of No Return wilderness. Our guides while we're here? The wolves I've studied for 13 years.
Watched them right here before, and I've never known where they go from here. It's the way it should be out here.
We're not the only ones trying to make our way in this wilderness. All around us are creatures of undaunted courage. Our own courage will be tested by this journey.
I don't know if either one of us could quit now.
And there's one thing we know for certain. There's no coming back from the River of No Return unchanged.
Hello and welcome to Dialogue. I'm Marcia Franklin. That was the introduction to a national PBS documentary filmed by two Idahoans on their honeymoon. Indeed, when Isaac Babcock asked his girlfriend Bjornen to marry him, it came with a unique proposal to start their marriage in the Frank Church River of No Return wilderness in central Idaho. And it wouldn't be the typical week-long honeymoon. The two would be gone for nearly a year. Plus, their journey would be documented on video with the hopes of educating a wider audience about wilderness. It's an adventure that Bjornen readily agreed to, and nearly 3 years later, the result is a documentary for the PBS series Nature. And with me in the studio to talk about their odyssey, I'm pleased to welcome Isaac and Bjornen Babcock. It's great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And one note, because this is a taped program, there will be no phone calls. Well, Isaac, I just have to say from the outset, what made you want to do this?
I'd spent a number of years, at least 10, working on the wolf reintroduction in Idaho, helping, working to recover wolves.
And I believe we have some footage of that. You were working for the Nez Perce tribe.
Yes, and a tremendous experience. And as we were going through it, though, it got to the point as wolves were recovering that my job was kind of turning over from recovering an endangered species to more managing a population. And at that point, I kind of started to wonder, well, what more can I do for wolves? And to me, I thought, well, if I can share some of the experiences that I've had with wolves, which seem to be a lot different than a lot of what you hear about from other people, boy, wouldn't that be great for them to see that other side of them? And so this was kind of the direction that we took.
So you had the experience with wolves, which we can see here. Did you have any experience with videography?
I'd been an aspiring, dreaming cameraman for a number of years. Had a few good mentors that let me used to carry their bags, and so this was a dream of mine, kind of. And Bjornen agreed to come along, and that made it all the better. And here we are.
Well, nice segue for me. Bjornen, the two of you met and fell in love, I believe, on a beach in Mexico, about as far away as you can get from Idaho in that respect. But why did you? First of all, what did you think when he said, hey, let's spend a year in a tent?
That sounded like an exciting idea to me. I guess, though, in the beginning, I'll admit I wasn't quite. It was more, I love seeing people follow their dreams, and it was more of, I love to support that. And then it sort of became a reality, and before I knew it, we were just doing it, so.
And we should say you're from Delaware, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So the backcountry is not something that you were terribly familiar with.
No, I was not familiar with it before. Yeah.
And you had an additional challenge that you discovered right off the top for yourself. Let's take a listen to part of the documentary.
Just before we set out on this adventure, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. My immune system has gone haywire and is attacking my joints. When it really flares up, we have to stop. And I know my pain is just as hard on him. But I was not going to miss this journey. You make your choices and take your chances. Life comes with no guarantees. I'd choose an adventure with hardship over no adventure at all, every time.
So, and that kind of encapsulates your philosophy, right? But it was not easy, was it? We've got some footage. It's not a walk in the woods, so to speak, to go into the Frank Church. Maybe we can roll some of that footage. You're climbing over things and falling down, right? And all the time, it's hurting more than it would be for the average hiker, right?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult at times.
Did you ever think about stopping?
The journey as a whole, yeah, I guess I did think about it. I knew that would be probably harder, though, if we stopped. So I felt like it was important to keep going and not sort of let this thing take over. And I feel like that was the right thing to do. So.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about, we'll talk more in the Web Extra, but preparation for this. I mean, it's one thing to think about going into the wilderness with a camera. It's another thing to actually do it. People may not realize that you can't just go into the wilderness, at least with a commercial idea in mind, to make a film without permission from the United States Forest Service in this instance. So what was their reaction when you first told them you wanted to go make a film in the wilderness?
I think when we first walked into the local district ranger, he kind of smiled, chuckled, and said, "You don't want to go there." And we said, "Well, yeah, we do." He said, no, you don't. It's pretty complicated. Filming in the wilderness is very difficult. It seems that there are a lot of interim regulations out there right now. What exactly is a commercial film as opposed to what is not a commercial film? And then if it is a commercial film, there's a whole nother set of benchmarks of whether or not such a thing would be allowed in the wilderness. So we got to spend a couple years.
I would say at least 2 years.
We went all the way to Washington, D.C. trying to get permission to do it, and eventually we did. They worked with us very well. We were very grateful for it. But it was a struggle. I don't know if we'd take on that aspect of it again.
Interesting, isn't it? You think about all the potential hazards and things that you might have in the wilderness, not maybe even realizing that one of the hardest parts is just simply getting a permit to get in. And I should say, in the interest of fair disclosure, that I have encountered this issue as well with the Forest Service, at first denying me a permit to go film as well. What do you think in general about this issue? Do you think that you should need a permit for filming?
How long do you have?
Yeah. Keep it brief. I don't think all filming should be allowed in the wilderness. I do think certain filming should definitely be allowed in the wilderness. As part of what the wilderness is set aside for is education about it, and hopefully in developing appreciation of it. I think that there are certain film projects that the impact, and I believe ours was one of them, is extremely low to the same minimal, the same as any other backcountry user.
In the sense that you weren't with a huge crew and everything.
Right. Yeah.
So you weren't going to be interrupting people's trip.
I think exceptions should never be made to what the wilderness allows. You should not be able to go use helicopters just because you're doing a special project on it. You should not be able to bring in generators, any of that kind of thing. You do not drop the benchmark or the bar on wilderness. I guess I would say I take it on a different line, and that is that certain projects, this included, are not looked at as commercial film projects, much the same as photography or writing a book or painting back in the wilderness. And if you do it that way, then you keep that commercial filming doesn't happen on wilderness. It's just that there's a different definition of what's commercial filming.
Well, before we get into kind of the specifics of how you lived in the wilderness, I wanted to ask you, how did you make the connection with the producers at Nature? A lot of aspiring filmmakers want to know. I was
definitely an aspiring filmmaker. I always liked Nature. I mean, this isn't a plug for them, it's just who I grew up watching, and I love public television. And I met them at some film festivals, and I started pitching them starting 10 years ago, and they were nice enough to listen to me and smile and say, "Come back when you have something a little bit better." And one time we gave them something, and they said, "Maybe
it's
we'll
better."
work with you. Yeah.
Well, it's fabulous, and I know that it changed a little bit from what you had originally thought of, right? It became more of a story about you, and that wasn't the necessarily the intent.
Not at all.
Talk a little bit more about that.
I guess any project that goes on for this amount of time, it's sort of hard to go into it and expect it to come out the same. But being newbies at this, we were definitely a little bit shocked how different it was. But
they wanted to focus on you, meaning make that the storyline.
Yeah, and I guess so. And I hope that the storyline, I hope it still focuses on wilderness, but there's definitely, we weren't intending to be in it at all at the start, so that was different for us.
But with all credit to them, they know how to make a film for the audience. And as our
we do not.
yeah, our mentors keep telling us, and I think that they are right, the biggest mistake we could do is to try to make a film for ourselves or for our peers. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully, without a doubt in the collaboration,
it worked out.
Yeah.
It worked out. So let's talk a little bit about how you did live. For some time you were in a tent, right, that had a stove inside of it to keep warm at sometimes.
At times, yeah, for the winter.
Right, so you had some type of shelter, and then other times you had a very interesting experience. You were able to stay for a couple months at something called the Taylor Ranch, which is operated by the University of Idaho.
Taylor Ranch, a very unique setting for wilderness, but actually there's a number of them within the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness, but a private inholding existed before wilderness designation. And I think when we first got the offer to go there, very generous offer I might add, but we were a little bit torn. Well, is this supposed to be the wilderness experience that we're out here to try to capture?
Yeah, we would have liked to have been in a tent sort of the whole time, but as things unfolded, it got to be a better and better idea.
And yeah, it ended up being a really necessary one for, on the one hand. On the other, it gave us a little bit of a chance to take in this other aspect of this wilderness, what's so kind of unique and different about it.
And ended up being necessary because?
Shoot, we're out there trying to hike around with solar panels, thinking that we can get enough electricity from the sun to keep the batteries charged.
In the winter time, that changes.
Yeah, it wasn't even winter, it was fall, and suddenly
the angle of the sun is not good enough anymore.
You needed a place to recharge your physical batteries and probably your own batteries a little bit too from all the hiking and everything. And it is interesting, these inholdings that exist in the wilderness. Let's talk about the animal life, because really that's at the center of your documentary. You have incredible footage of wolves, for one thing, but that doesn't come easily, even in the wilderness. We've got scenes of you dressed up in camouflage and sitting in a tent for hours and days, really, to get pictures of wolves.
I think that was, I'd spent, 13, 14 years working on wolves, and I thought that I had a little bit of a reality of, okay, it's going to be difficult, but if we really set our minds to it, we will be optimistic. That was a pretty quick surprise to me that, boy, we saw wolves very seldom. I mean, they move all over the mountains fine, and then, first of all, we couldn't keep up with them. Second of all, you throw all this gear involved with making a film, and it was very deflating.
But it paid off. You did, as we can see from this footage in a moment. You sat and you waited, and in this scene we can see you did get to see wolves. And Isaac, I have to ask you, after all your experience and your years working with the Nez Perce tribe, what new did you learn about wolves from this experience?
Well, what I really enjoyed from this experience, as opposed to perhaps, when I was a biologist, was here I could sit back and observe them more and just try to be absorbed in the surroundings. As fluffy as that sounds, but it's really true. I didn't have to be hands-on manipulating anything, trying to catch anything and radio collar it and track it. It was more, I got to be an observer, and to me that was really, really special.
And see the interaction between different groups like this one here. Bjorn, what were your thoughts as you saw wolves? I assume you hadn't seen them before, but maybe.
I'd actually worked with Isaac before.
Oh, you had a little bit? Okay.
Yeah, so volunteered a little bit. So I had seen them before this year, but it's always amazing. I mean, it doesn't make it any less amazing to see them.
You said, Isaac, in the film that sometimes finally getting it on film that you literally were kind of shaky.
Oh yeah, yeah. You've been waiting to see wolves for a month now and looking all over the place, and then suddenly they show up, and then they might even do something that you've been waiting for 10 years to film, and you're shaking the camera. You're on a big lens, which the whole trick to that is to keep it steady, and the image is bouncing around in the viewfinder because you're touching it, and you're knowing that the shot's going to poop ball right away. And anyway, yeah, I was shaking a lot.
One of the things that you really wanted to see was a wolf making a kill. And there's some interesting scenes in there where you come across the aftermath, but you didn't actually see it happen. And yet finally you did see that happen. There was a deer that foundered, that became stuck in some cold water, and you were able to film that. And why was it so important for you to get that on tape, to see that?
I feel like it's really important to show their whole lives. You know, there's a lot of critics out there because wolves are predators. I think it's because they compete with us as humans, perhaps. And we've gotten to see a really neat other side of them as a real family, a real caring family. But wolves make a living. Wolves survive by, as predators. And I think you need to show that whole, their life in its entirety. And that was a huge component that I'd never gotten to film before.
And you had the videographer's nightmare here, where the scene that you're waiting for is all of a sudden behind the tree.
It's always behind the tree.
And you can't get it, and you're having to run. And I assume you're doing some filming as well, Bjorn, and of Isaac running, right? You're a participant in this. You also had a small camera with you, trying to get the scene.
Right.
And that makes it different, doesn't it? I mean, there's that burden.
Right.
To try and document. You were doing the film. Had you filmed before?
Just for fun.
And this was for fun.
Right. It's amazing how it changes when it becomes a job.
Well, you're still talking to each other, so. Wolves are, there's perhaps no other environmental issue that I have covered in this state that engenders such passionate feelings on both sides, and there continues to be a lot in the news about wolves. This documentary is not an overtly political documentary. It shows what it's like in the Frank Church River No Return Wilderness. Is there a message, though, regarding wolves that you would like to get out to people?
I'd like to hope that just in watching this, people see that that there is a really intriguing and family-oriented side of wolves, and that they're a very integral part of nature and necessary part.
You have some phenomenal footage, by the way, of pups, wolf pups. Go on.
That was Isaac's footage, but
ours, yeah. But and I think that side of wolves doesn't get seen or explored. I think times for wolves right now are very tough. I think you look at what's going on in the state, and we're managing wolves, shooting them from helicopters. We radio collar them one day, and then we use the radio collars to go out and eliminate large numbers from the pack. In efforts to increase the elk population, which that's a whole nother controversial issue. But I think from working on wolves, that one of the biggest struggles that wolves still have in front of them is getting accurate information out to the public. Wolves are controversial. They always will be. I just like people to get an accurate look at them.
You hear so many stories about wolves being aggressive towards humans and all this stuff, and we've never seen anything like that, so it's just seems nice to get that side of it out as well.
So you had no fear, for instance?
No. There's nothing to fear from wolves.
Here we see a wolf that came quite close to you, was very curious.
It was just like we were. It was staring at us, like, who are you? And we're staring at it, and what are you doing? It's just they're a lot like us.
Yeah, look at there is not a predatory move in what's going on. It's all a curiosity thing. I get baffled with a lot of the stories that I hear where people are being hunted or, barely escaped with their lives. I wasn't there, perhaps it's true. I just have been around them a lot out there, and we haven't never had that kind of experience, and so I'd like to.
You saw some other wildlife as well that was extraordinary. You have video of salmon jumping at Dagger Falls, right? You have video of otters playing in different seasons, of the dipper bird, which is a unique animal that I learned about from your documentary, of bighorn sheep. Talk a little bit about what it was like to live in this environment, in this wild environment.
Boy, I don't know. It was amazing to get to see all these things that you hear about, and I mean, I'd never seen a salmon in the wild before. That was pretty amazing. Yeah, there's a lot going on out there. It's a pretty complex system.
And I enjoyed, you were reading from a diary that you wrote, Bjorn, in your documentary about how you, I mean, without anthropomorphizing, I think that's the word too much, but you know, with your arthritis and some of the challenges, you identified with some of the animals, especially the ones that you saw that were limping or having issues, you know, that you.
Yeah, I think honestly that's easier to say after the fact. It makes a good story,
Yeah.
but at the time, I mean, just dealing with all that pain, I don't think I was putting it quite that succinctly. But yeah, looking back on it, it sort of was a nice tie.
What did anything surprise you of the other animals that you watched and documented that you hadn't seen when you were working before?
Well, again, I think that I got to see a lot more than I'd ever seen before because I was there with sort of a different mission, and that was to sit back and be an observer and take it in. And you get quiet, you sit back, and you know everything seems still and like nothing's going on, and suddenly you find out it's all alive. I think all these little sideline characters, which that's not to say they were little or sideline, but were, for me, the saviors a lot of the time because we really saw wolves very seldom. They were too hard to see. And just when you'd be ready to give up on the whole thing and think this is all ridiculous, you'd have a wonderful day with dippers or otters. And even if you didn't have the camera with you because you were just hiking, they just put you in such a mood. It was just like, how can you look at the dipper and not be happy about life? I mean, it's freezing
so
cold,
entertaining.
ice is everywhere, and it's just diving under the ice, going everywhere. And it's like the world is perfect, and you think, huh, it's not so bad out here. It's
Right, because you had a lot of pressure on yourself to make that film, but then every once in a while you could just stop and look around.
Actually enjoy the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, enjoy the moment. Maybe you want to go back again and not make a film or anything like that. Did you find that the wilderness is healthy, that it is supporting as rich a number of animals as you expected it would be? Or are there challenges to it?
I think there's certainly challenges to it, but is the wilderness healthy? I wasn't sure where you're going with that yet, but I would say yes and yes. One, it's healthy and supporting of the wildlife and the animals out there, and also I was wondering if you were asking from your own and personal and spiritual level, extremely healthy. I think being out there,
good point.
for me, it just, when I think of the wilderness and I think healthy, I think, yeah, I'm healthy when I'm out there.
So two ways to look at it. Yeah, I was thinking the health of the ecosystem, but that's another thing to look at.
It's good for the soul. It really is.
What were your greatest challenges? We've already talked about just the filming itself. You know, and how heavy was your pack with the camera and everything?
We tried not to weigh them.
Yeah,
for that reason. Yours was upwards of 100 pounds at least.
We weighed them
know.
once.
Yeah.
On accident, kind of. When we were curious, and they were more than we were happy about. But
too heavy.
Too heavy. Well, what about the cold? Was that one of your major challenges?
The cold is, I've never loved cold. I wouldn't say it was one of the major challenges. I was sort of expecting that one, but I'd say one of the major challenges was food. It's just the preparation. I mean, a year is a long time. Not that we had to, prepare food for an entire year all at once. We did come in and out, but it was a challenge.
And we'll talk more about this in the Web Extra, but you did have to come in and out to resupply, right?
We did.
Right.
And we had some resupplies brought back to us.
Yep.
And I know that one of the other challenges in the summer was mosquitoes. You have a very funny scene in your documentary about the hordes of mosquitoes, and here you are on your honeymoon, being attacked.
Hiding in a tent.
Yeah, a lot of mosquitoes. It's hard to understand how they fit into the ecosystem, isn't it?
I know.
Like what their purpose is.
They're not necessary.
No.
But that was where we see this footage of you just trying to get dressed as fast as possible.
Yeah, they can be bad in places. Yeah.
I think there were the physical challenges, but for me, and just keeping it really brief, but I think one of the hardest things was the mental challenges and starting to question halfway through being out there. We set out to do this documentary on what is a wilderness experience to different people. We were failing miserably. We were failing to get all of these events that we hoped would happen, that we would take in. We were failing. We couldn't even carry our bags. We were a mess. And we'll start asking, well, what are we doing out here? And somewhere about halfway through, we quit worrying so much about making a film. And suddenly we started having our own wilderness experience. And that was awesome. I mean, that was, the film went to the pot. Suddenly, wow, the next day got all better, and we enjoyed where we were at.
And for your relationship, a strengthening aspect, I'm sure.
I'd say so, yeah. I think we can trust each other pretty well. Yeah.
So were you ever scared?
I was scared a couple times when I heard about weather coming in.
Yeah, that's right.
Or lightning or anything like that? But
mostly storms and cold, like you were saying. So yeah, I guess.
Big storms coming in, still camped on top of the mountain. We were supposed to be down a few thousand feet, and we hadn't
made it down
gotten
yet.
all of our junk down off the mountain yet.
As we wrap up, what do you want people to be left with this documentary? What's the takeaway for them?
I feel like if, I guess, even one person can just understand a little bit more about the importance of having these places, wilderness as a place that is not dominated by humans, I think that's really important to have these areas. And they're fewer and fewer these days. So.
And what's next for you? Are you going to continue this with the filmmaking?
Hopefully, yeah. Continue doing some filmmaking. Bjorn is working on starting.
I'm not. I'm done with filming.
Bjorn is trying to work on starting up a local farm, and yeah, we'll see what.
You'd like to continue?
I would like to continue filming. Yeah, I really enjoy doing it, and I hope that if done right, there can be some things that help, preserve our wild animals and our public lands.
So continue filming in the outdoor venue.
Yeah. I like the outdoors, I like wildlife. Shoot, I'd spend the rest of my life trying to film and do something concise on wilderness, which I don't feel like we've even scratched the surface of yet.
Well, we will look for that, and I have every confidence that you will be successful as you continue, if you manage to get through this experience. For more information on the Babcock's adventure, please go to our website. You can go to idahoptv.org and click on Dialogue to learn more. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you.
Presentation of Dialogue on Idaho Public Television is made possible through the generous support of the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation, committed to fulfilling the Moore family's legacy of building the great state of Idaho. Check out our website, like us on Facebook, or follow us on Twitter.